There is a moment, probably familiar to you, where you are lying in bed at night and your mind simply refuses to stop. You are replaying a conversation you had 3 days ago. You are rehearsing what you will say tomorrow in a meeting that may or may not even go the way you imagine. You are running through every possible outcome of a decision you have not even made yet. And somehow, by the time your brain is done with all of this, it is 2 in the morning. You feel exhausted but not sleepy, anxious but not about anything specific, and deeply, profoundly stuck. You are not solving problems, you are not preparing, you are not getting smarter or safer. You are just spinning. And the worst part is that some quiet part of you already knows this, but you cannot stop. That is overthinking. And almost everyone who experiences it believes the same thing about it. They believe the solution is to think better, to organize thoughts more clearly, to make a pros and cons list, to journal, to meditate, to find the right framework that will finally allow their mind to settle. And so they search, they read articles, they watch videos like this one, they try new techniques. And sometimes those techniques work for a day or two, and then the spinning comes back, and they are left wondering what they did wrong, why they cannot seem to fix this thing that feels so fixable. But here is what almost nobody tells you. And this is the thing that changes everything when you actually understand it. Not just hear it, but genuinely understand it at a level that shifts something inside you. Overthinking is not a thinking problem. It was never a thinking problem. Overthinking is what happens when the nervous system is dysregulated, and the mind attempts to use thought as a way to restore a sense of safety and control. That is it. That is the whole thing. And once you see that, once you really see it, you cannot unsee it. And more importantly, you stop trying to fix it in ways that will never work. Think about the last time you were truly overthinking something, not just thinking carefully or considering your options, but genuinely spiraling. What was underneath it? If you are honest with yourself, underneath almost every spiral there is fear. Fear of making the wrong choice, fear of being judged, fear of losing something you care about, fear of not being good enough, fear of the unknown. The thoughts are not the origin of the problem. The fear is. The thoughts are just the mind attempting to outmaneuver the fear by gaining enough certainty, enough control over possible futures to feel like nothing bad can happen. And this is why thinking harder never works. You cannot think your way out of fear. You can analyze it. You can understand it intellectually. You can build sophisticated mental models of why you are afraid and where it came from. But none of that dissolves the fear itself. The fear lives in the body, it lives in the nervous system, and no amount of cognitive effort will touch it directly. In fact, the more you think in response to fear, the more you signal to your nervous system that there is something genuinely threatening happening, which makes the fear worse, which makes you think more, which makes the fear worse again. This is the loop. This is why overthinking is self-perpetuating, not because you are broken or weak, but because you are doing exactly what a human brain does when it perceives a threat and does not have a direct way to respond to it. Your brain has not changed structurally in any meaningful way since your ancestors were living in small tribes on the savannah. The part of your brain that generates fear and threat responses is ancient. It is fast, it is automatic, and it is not particularly good at distinguishing between a physical threat, like a predator about to attack you, and a psychological threat, like the possibility that your boss might think poorly of you. To that ancient part of your brain, a threat is a threat. When it detects one, it activates your stress response. Cortisol and adrenaline flood your body. Your heart rate increases, your muscles tense, your attention narrows, your thinking becomes more rigid and repetitive. All of this is designed to help you survive a physical emergency. But you are not in a physical emergency. You are sitting at your kitchen table worrying about whether you said the right thing in an email. And so all of this activation has nowhere to go. There is no predator to run from. There is no threat to fight. There is just this low-grade, persistent sense that something is wrong and that you need to figure out what it is before something bad happens. And so you think, and you think, and you think. Not because thinking will actually help, but because it is the only tool you have consciously available to you in that moment. It feels like doing something about the problem, even when it is not. Intelligence can actually make overthinking worse, because an intelligent mind is very good at generating plausible-sounding reasons why the next thought will be the one that finally resolves the uncertainty, why this time the analysis will be thorough enough, why if you just think about it from one more angle, you will find the clarity that has been eluding you. Intelligent people can maintain the illusion that they are productively thinking when they are actually just spinning, for much longer than people who get bored and walk away. This is not a compliment to overthinking. It is an explanation for why so many sharp, capable, driven people are trapped in it for years. So what actually works? And I want to be honest with you before I answer that. What actually works is not glamorous. It is not a hack. It is not something that will transform you in a week. It is slow, it is gradual. It requires consistency and a willingness to relate to yourself in a fundamentally different way than you probably do right now. But it is real. It addresses the source of the problem rather than just managing symptoms. The first thing that genuinely works is developing what psychologists call interoceptive awareness. That is the ability to notice what is happening in your body. Most overthinkers are almost completely disconnected from their physical experience. They live in their heads. They notice thoughts constantly, but rarely notice physical sensations. And this matters because what they are calling overthinking, when experienced in the body, is actually a collection of physical sensations. Tightness in the chest, tension in the shoulders, a constriction in the throat, a low-level hum of activation in the belly. These are the felt experiences of the fear that is driving the thoughts. And here is something important. Sensations, unlike thoughts, are finite. They have a beginning and an end. They arise, they peak, and they pass. Thoughts, on the other hand, are potentially infinite. One thought leads to another with no natural ending point. But if you can learn to drop your attention out of the thoughts and into the sensations underneath them, you give the nervous system a chance to actually process and release the activation it is carrying. And when that happens, the thoughts slow down. Not because you forced them to, not because you figured out the right answer, but because the fear that was generating them has been given space to move through and dissipate. This is not the same as suppressing your feelings or distracting yourself from them. It is actually the opposite. It is turning toward the discomfort rather than away from it. Allowing yourself to feel the fear rather than think about it. And this is deeply counterintuitive for most people, because most of us were taught in one way or another that feelings are problems to be solved rather than experiences to be felt. We were taught that the way to deal with uncomfortable emotions is to figure out why you feel that way, or to talk yourself out of it, or to change the situation so you no longer have to feel it. Very few of us were taught that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply sit with the feeling, give it space, let it be there without fighting it, and trust that it will eventually move on its own. But that is exactly what the nervous system needs. Not analysis, not solutions, not reassurance, just space. Just the experience of being present with what is, without trying to change it. And this is what meditation, in its most basic form, is actually teaching. Not how to stop having thoughts. You cannot stop having thoughts. Thoughts are what minds do. What meditation teaches is how to change your relationship to thoughts, how to notice them without being grabbed by them, how to let them arise and pass without following every one of them into a spiral. And in doing so over time, it trains the nervous system to be less reactive. If you have tried meditation and felt like you were bad at it because your mind kept wandering, here is something that might change how you think about that. The mind wandering is not the failure. The mind wandering is the practice. Every single time you notice that your mind has wandered and you gently bring it back, you are training the muscle of noticing. You are building the capacity to catch yourself in the grip of a thought spiral, and remember that you do not have to follow it. That moment of noticing is the entire practice, and it gets easier over time, not because the thoughts stop coming, but because you get faster at catching yourself and gentler with yourself when you do. Another thing that genuinely works, and this one often surprises people, is physical movement. Specifically, vigorous physical movement that gives the stress response activation somewhere to go. When your nervous system detects a threat, it mobilizes your body for action. It dumps energy into your muscles and cardiovascular system because it is preparing you to physically do something. When you instead sit still and think, that energy has nowhere to go. It just circulates, But when you move, when you run or lift weights or swim or dance, you are completing the stress response cycle. You are using the energy your nervous system prepared, and in doing so you are signaling to it that the threat has passed, that you survived, that it is safe to return to baseline. This is not just a metaphor. This is what is happening physiologically. Researchers who study stress and trauma have been documenting this for decades. The body needs to move in order to fully process and release stress activation. Many people who struggle with overthinking notice an almost immediate shift in the quality of their thoughts after vigorous exercise. The urgency decreases, the catastrophizing softens, the mind becomes more spacious. This is not a placebo. This is the nervous system doing exactly what it was designed to do when given the opportunity. Now let us go deeper than techniques. Because techniques can help you manage overthinking. But to genuinely transform your relationship to it, you need to understand something about why your nervous system became calibrated this way in the first place. For most people, the answer has to do with early experiences. Not necessarily trauma in a dramatic clinical sense, though that is certainly part of it for some, but more broadly, the accumulated experiences of childhood that shaped how safe or unsafe your nervous system learned to feel in the world. Children are completely dependent on their caregivers, not just for food and shelter, but for their sense of safety, their sense of being loved, their sense of being fundamentally okay as people. And when caregivers are inconsistent, critical, emotionally unavailable, or simply too overwhelmed to provide the kind of warm and attuned attention that children need, children learn to be on alert. They learn to scan for danger. They learn to try to predict and control and manage the emotional environment around them in order to feel safe. And the primary tool they have for doing this is their mind. Thinking, analyzing, trying to figure out what they need to do or be or say in order to get their needs met, to avoid punishment, to earn love. This is where overthinking begins for most people. Not in adulthood, in childhood, as a survival strategy, as the best available response to an environment that felt unpredictable or threatening. And the extraordinary thing about nervous systems is that they learn, they adapt. And once they have learned that hypervigilance and constant thinking are necessary for safety, they keep doing it. Long after the original threatening environment is gone, long after you are an adult with resources and choices that the child you once were never had. The nervous system does not automatically update just because the circumstances have changed. It keeps running the old program until something changes it. This is not about blame. Your caregivers were almost certainly doing the best they could with what they had, shaped by their own childhoods and their own unprocessed fears. Understanding the origin of your overthinking is not about assigning fault. It is about developing compassion for yourself. Because when you understand that your hyperactive, spinning mind is not a character flaw, but a learned adaptation, your relationship to it changes. You stop being at war with it. You stop hating it, which ironically makes it worse because nothing dysregulates a nervous system quite as effectively as being at war with itself. You start to relate to it with something more like curiosity and tenderness. And that shift in relationship is itself deeply regulating. There is a close connection between overthinking and perfectionism that is worth understanding. Perfectionism at its core is not really about wanting things to be perfect. That is how it presents on the surface. Underneath it is a belief, usually unconscious, that your worth as a person is contingent on your performance, that if you make mistakes or fall short of some standard, you will lose love, approval, or safety. And this belief generates enormous fear. Fear of getting things wrong, fear of being seen as inadequate, fear of judgment. And what do you do with that fear? You think. You prepare obsessively, you review and re-review. You imagine every possible way things could go wrong and try to develop a contingency for each one. Not because you enjoy it, but because the thought of being caught unprepared feels genuinely unbearable. Perfectionism and overthinking feed each other in a vicious cycle. The perfectionism generates the fear generates the overthinking. The overthinking produces either exhaustion and avoidance, which triggers more fear because now you are behind and unprepared, or it produces actions that are never quite good enough because the standard was impossible to begin with. which then confirms the belief that you are inadequate, which then generates more fear. Around and around it goes. To interrupt this cycle, you have to address the underlying belief, and the belief is not changed by arguing with it logically. You can know intellectually that your worth is not contingent on your performance, and still feel in your gut that it absolutely is. The belief is stored in the nervous system, not just in the intellect. Changing it requires experiences, not just arguments. Experiences of getting things wrong and discovering that you are still okay. Experiences of being seen in your imperfection and still being loved. Experiences of failing and surviving, even growing. This is why the people who seem most free from overthinking and perfectionism are almost never people who have had everything go right. They are people who have had things go significantly wrong, who have made real mistakes and faced real consequences, and who came through it with a lived sense that they can handle difficulty, that they are not as fragile as their fear tells them they are. And with each of those experiences, the fear loses a little of its grip. Let me say something about uncertainty, because overthinkers almost universally have a very low tolerance for it, not because they chose to or because they are weaker than others, but because their nervous system learned that uncertainty equals danger, that not knowing what is going to happen means something bad is likely to happen, and so every unresolved question, every ambiguous situation, every decision without a clear right answer triggers the alarm system. And the mind starts working overtime to try to achieve certainty, to nail down every variable, to eliminate the not knowing. But certainty is largely an illusion. Almost nothing in life is actually certain. You cannot know for sure how a conversation will go. You cannot know whether a decision will turn out to be right. You cannot know what another person is truly thinking. Life is fundamentally, irreducibly uncertain. And a mind that is at war with uncertainty is a mind that is at war with life itself. It will never win, and it will exhaust itself trying. The path forward is not to achieve more certainty. It is to build a higher tolerance for it, to learn, gradually, to be in a state of not knowing without that state immediately triggering the alarm. And this is built the same way everything else is built, through repeated experiences of being in uncertainty and discovering that you are okay anyway. Overthinking does not happen in isolation. It is often most intense in the context of relationships, in what other people think of us, in whether we said the right thing, in whether we are loved and accepted. This makes complete sense given everything we have discussed. We are social animals. Connection is not optional for us. It is as necessary as food and water. And so, threats to our relationships, or perceived threats, trigger the oldest and deepest fear responses we have. What overthinkers do in relationships is monitor and analyze. They read into every tone of voice and delayed text message. They replay conversations looking for signs of displeasure. They try to predict what others are thinking so they can adjust and manage the relational environment the same way they tried to manage their early environment as children. And of course it does not work, because you cannot actually control what other people think or feel, no matter how much data you gather. People are complex. They are often not even clear to themselves about what they feel, and attempting to navigate relationships primarily through analysis rather than presence and connection is both exhausting and fundamentally lonely. The shift that makes the biggest difference in relationships is the shift from managing to being present, from calculating the right response to actually being with the other person, from monitoring for threats to genuinely listening. And this requires, again, a regulated nervous system, because when you are dysregulated, presence feels dangerous. Being fully open to what is happening in the moment means being fully open to whatever comes, including the possibility of pain or rejection. And a dysregulated nervous system will retreat into the apparent safety of the analytical mind every time. But safety in relationships is not built through analysis. It is built through accumulated experiences of being vulnerable and being met with warmth rather than judgment, through discovering that you can be imperfect and uncertain and not together and still be valued. Every time you take that risk and it goes okay, every time you let yourself be seen and you are not destroyed by what follows, the nervous system updates its model. The world becomes a little less threatening. Other people become a little less dangerous. And the need to be constantly thinking and monitoring and managing relaxes a little. I want to address something that sometimes comes up when people begin to understand what overthinking really is. Sometimes people feel a kind of resistance to letting it go. Even knowing it causes suffering, a part of them holds on. And this is not irrational. It is actually very understandable. Because if the overthinking developed as a survival strategy, as a way of staying safe in a threatening environment, then it feels protective. There is a part of many overthinkers that genuinely believes, even if not consciously, that if they stop worrying and preparing so obsessively, something terrible will happen, that the overthinking is what stands between them and disaster. If you recognize this in yourself, the response is not to fight it. The response is curiosity and compassion. That part of you that holds on to the overthinking is trying to protect you. It has been trying to protect you maybe since you were very young. You do not have to argue with it or conquer it. You can simply acknowledge it. You can say to that part of yourself, I see you. I understand why you are doing this. And I also know that we are okay now. We are safe now in ways we were not before. And it is okay to start letting some of this go. This is, in essence, what good therapy does. Not primarily through techniques or cognitive reframing, though those have their place, but through the experience of a relationship in which you can be fully seen, in which your fear and your defenses and your old strategies are witnessed with compassion rather than judgment, and in which you can gradually begin to update your sense of what relationships and the world can be like. The nervous system learns through experience, and the experience of being genuinely and consistently held by another person without judgment is one of the most powerful regulatory experiences available to us. Let me bring this back to where we started. That moment lying in bed with your mind racing. That feeling of being trapped in your own head. That exhausting loop of thoughts that never actually resolves anything. You now know what is really happening in those moments. Your nervous system has detected a threat, real or imagined, and it is mobilizing your mental resources in an attempt to neutralize it. The thoughts are not the problem. They are the symptom. The problem is the underlying activation, the fear, the sense of unsafety that is driving them. And the solution is not to think better, but to learn to regulate your nervous system in ways that address the fear at its source. That means developing the ability to feel your feelings rather than just think about them. It means moving your body so that stress activation has somewhere to go. It means practicing being present with uncertainty rather than rushing to resolve it. It means looking honestly at the experiences that calibrated your nervous system toward hypervigilance and developing compassion for the younger version of you who learned to survive through constant mental monitoring. It means risking presence and vulnerability in your relationships rather than hiding behind analysis. And it means being patient with yourself because none of this changes overnight. Overthinking is not who you are. It is something that happened to you and in you in response to real circumstances and a genuine need for safety in a world that at some point did not feel safe. It is not a character flaw. It is not a sign that you are broken. It is a sign that you are human, and that you have been trying your best to protect yourself with the tools available to you. And the fact that you want something different, the fact that you are here looking for a way through, is itself a kind of courage. Because choosing to loosen the grip of the patterns that have kept you feeling safe, even when those patterns are also making you miserable, requires something real. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness in which thoughts arise. And that awareness is always there underneath the noise, spacious and still and fundamentally okay. The clarity you have been searching for was never located at the end of the next thought. It was always already here, waiting for you to stop thinking long enough to notice it.